Hello and welcome to the Orthodox Oasis. My name is Jerome, or Hieronymus, and I played Forspoken. Forspoken is an action role-playing game developed by Luminous Productions and published by Square Enix. You jump into the shoes of Frey Holland, a street urchin living a rough life in New York City who is mysteriously transported to the fantastic world of Athia. There, with a disembodied partner in the form of a cuff, she must discover the secret of a corruption she calls the Break, defeat the four powerful, insane rulers called Tantas, save the remaining people of Athia from their doom, and become the woman she was always meant to be.
Frey. No name for a demon.
I am the one you seek, the one and only Tanta Sila.
So let's talk about the game rating from the ESRB. It received a mature 17 plus, with tags being the strong language and violence. The violence I will describe as being as the following. Magical combat with zombie-like creatures. The magic you use is cast with her mind and the movement of her arms and that kind of stuff. There is no blood in the combat at all. I don't remember any blood in the cutscenes or the environment either. The violence is completely contained to the combat, and when the enemies die, they just turn to dust. Very tame as violence goes. The other ESRB tag was strong language. The game earned this one with flying colors. It passed Go, collected $200 twice with its language. The main character never misses a chance to cuss. No matter the situation, whether it's a calm situation, a hectic situation, she's cussing. She's cussing a lot. Frey lets loose explicitives like it's candy on Halloween or fireworks during the 4th of July. Does it fit the character? A young lady who is a street urchin earning money as a criminal? Yes. Its excessiveness in strong languages is juxtaposed with the fact that not a single other character in the world of Athia uses any such language. Beyond those two items, I'll bring up two more things. The magic is not explained in any detail. It's just an inherent ability that Frey has, which allows our character to affect the world around them, including the Tantas have special abilities. One is able to affect reality, the other one is affect illusions, and stuff like that. It's different, weird. They don't explain it at all. There's no weird, like, demonic stuff that it's just left unexplained. Frey herself will learn to control the elements of earth, fire, water, and air. She casts these magical abilities by flinging her arms around in a logical manner to the attack she's casting. So she uses a whip, she like flings her arm around. It makes sense. That's all that's happening with the magic. She also gets magical parkour abilities that allow her to traverse the land. Nothing special about theirs. Runs fast, she grabs on things, hooks, and flies around. Stuff like that. I will bring up the enemies as well, which are, for the most part, sick and deformed people and animals. They're not super horrific by any means. You will see exposed bones from time to time, and some of the creatures can be slightly creepy. On to the review proper now. I don't hate this game. I didn't love it either. This is an interesting one. There's so many interesting ideas, and the combat is incredible, as is the parkour system. The game's not polished, and I dare say it's not even finished. The first impressions are important, and it doesn't give a good one. It really doesn't, unfortunately. It's sad. There's so many small issues, quality of life things, which each individual one wouldn't be a big deal in a larger game, but death by paper cuts, there's so many. They just add up. It's silly sometimes. I'm talking about things like there's a weird fade to black all the time, fade to white sometimes, multiple indications when you purchase an item, like there's like, oh, you purchased the item, oh, here's the item, oh, it can be crafted now. It's like so many small quality of life stuff, and it just adds up. It's really unfortunate. As we do the review, I want to talk about the good things without being too negative, but there's a lot of negative. There just is. There's a good game in here. I actually enjoyed the game. The combat's really fun, but we got to talk about the bad too, unfortunately. Just so many problems and baffling decisions. And let's start with the story. Tell me if this sounds familiar. A young person wakes up in a world unlike their own with a disembodied voice as a companion with new elemental powers, to discover the world covered in a deadly miasma brought about by 4 antagonists that you'll need to seek out. Why does this game have a very similar overview as Ghostwire? That was very interesting. My next review, Forspoken and Ghostwire, very similar overviews. The story in this one follows our protagonist, Frey Holland. She is given a 3rd chance at life. She's a criminal. This is her 3rd count of, I believe, grand larceny. So expensive items too. That's how she chooses to live in New York City. After getting out of her current situation, she goes and steals again. This time it's a weird cuff thing she finds in an abandoned building, and that transports her to Athia, the land that the story takes place in. Athia's seen better days. The only safe place is left is a place called Sapal. All of the Athian people have gathered there. That's all that's left of the world. The rest of the world is broken down, covered in a miasma. Anything outside turns into corrupted zombie-like creatures, human and the wildlife. There's just death. And the whole time, Frey just wants to go home. It's not a pleasant place to be, not for the Athian people and not for Frey. Not her home. She's from New York. She doesn't want to be here, and you probably wouldn't want to be there either. The story unfolds. Frey needs to go out and find the 4 Tantas who have gone crazy, and everybody thinks the corruption is coming from them. They used to be wise, benevolent leaders, but now they're just insane and crazy, even to the point where they're murdering their own people. I enjoyed the story overall with its twists and turns. There's a good story deep in there, and for what it was worth, I enjoyed it. Frey's not a likable person. Surprise, surprise, she's a criminal urchin kid who was abandoned as a child. She doesn't believe in anybody, trusts anybody. She only lives to day to survive. She's got a cat. That's all she has, a cat and some kicks, some shoes she's collected, probably stolen. And the companion she has is the Cuff. He's not very likable either, for an understandable reason as well. They're both unlikable people stuck with each other in the story, and it's understandable. It makes sense that they're unlikable. It's probably a bit much. Honestly, it's probably a bit much. I can understand why the average person might not enjoy the dialogue they have and the story between them. The banter is cold and adversarial for most of the game, as all she wants to do is escape, whereas he kind of is pushing her to deal with the world problems. Like, he kind of wants her to deal with what's going on in the world, where she doesn't belong anywhere. She doesn't really belong in New York City. She's a street urchin, and she doesn't belong in Athia because it's a mythical world that she's not from. People want things from her, they expect things from her, and she's not having it. She doesn't want to rely on anybody because she's never been able to rely on anybody, and everybody wants her to be someone she's not. She's not ready for it, she doesn't want it, and it takes a while. Near the end of the story, you're stuck with an unlikable person for the entire time, and it probably feels that way, honestly. You nonetheless feel for Frey. When you're not annoyed by her, you feel for Frey, because you're hoping that she grows to be the person she's supposed to be the hero of the people. You're wanting that, and it does happen at the end. Exactly at the end. So the entire game, you're stuck with the unlikable Frey. The story's interesting. I enjoyed it. It's got problems. The dialogue's weird. I'm pretty sure there's some lore they messed up in a couple spots that I caught. It's spoilers, unfortunately, so I'm not going to go into it, but I'm pretty sure they literally messed up their story in a couple spots. But here's where the story has a problem. It jives and gets in the way of the open world gameplay. I'll start with the combat. It's great, with an asterisk. I really liked it at the end. You get 4 trees of abilities and spells, and it feels great at the end of the game when you have these 4 trees and you're flying around, blowing enemies up. You've got all these spells at your disposal. It is awesome. It is great. The beginning of the game is a slog, especially when I tried to play on a hard mode. The enemies just had extra health. That's boring. They didn't do extra damage to you. There was actually a different modifier for them to do extra damage to you, but they just normally just have extra health. Boring. Come on. The 4 trees are the earth tree, which allows you to use rocks and plants to damage and slow your enemy. The fire allows you to get in close quarter combats to attack your enemy and burn them up. The water tree allows you debuffs and for you to damage your enemy, and all the trees are kind of the same. That being said, you're just going to enjoy the different colors and explosions and flinging yourself around, flinging your attacks around, throw the enemies around. That's what's truly important, even if the way the game works is the same. Enemies basically have different weaknesses, and that's the real reason you'll be changing between the trees, not because they particularly act differently, which I wish they would more often. Another big problem with the combat system is that you don't get like two of the trees until the end game. Like more than half the game is over before you get access to the other 2 trees. And the story is pushing towards the end, even though you want to like go and use these abilities, you can't really because the story's wrapping up. So that's weird. The end game, you can go finish and do your completionist stuff. It's fun as a sandbox to run around with all your abilities and complete the challenges and stuff. So that part's pretty fun. The game is definitely at its best in the combat. The rest of the gameplay is trite and boring. It is. All you do is you go around and collect what are called magic fonts, I believe. Magic fonts. That's the exploration in the gameplay. Go out and collect these fonts. There's a couple exploring. You can increase your stats by finding these statues. There's a couple of challenges to give you extra crafting materials, even though it's I'm pretty sure it's faster to just go in the environment and pick up the materials you need. And you don't really need to upgrade your stuff at all. Kind of pointless. It's not necessary. The gameplay is boring besides the combat. If you're not in combat, you're bored. You really are. It's not a good open world. One of the things you can do is go to these villages and liberate them, I guess. You can kill all the bad guys, and then nothing happens. The world's not safe for anybody to leave the main city of Sepal. Why are you liberating the towns? There's no point to it. There's no point at the point of the storyline to do that. It's really weird. There's also these linear dungeons that have rooms of combat and bosses at the end of them. More combat, I guess. You don't really need. Some of them literally just have lore at the end of them. There's many parts of the game where you're just liberating places and doing things just to get lore. Okay. Why don't you put the lore in the game for me, please? Let's talk about briefly why the story and the gameplay don't jive. It's supposed to be an open world, but they also have a very specific path and story they want to tell. That doesn't jive unless you are able to go to a certain spot when you're ready and want to. The game doesn't allow that. The game literally doesn't allow that. This is not an open world. This is a slowly opening corridor simulator. You're stuck in these corridors, and even if you jank your way or later on you do have the abilities to explore more, the game still doesn't let you. The game teleports you back on the path it wants you because the story has to be experienced from point A to point B to point C. It should not have been an open world. It shouldn't have been. There was no point to it. It literally teleports you when you try to go explore the open world back onto the path. Inexplicable. I don't know why this happened. The game would have been far more interesting and better if it was an open world. Sure, I can't get to certain places because I don't have abilities yet. A semi-Metroidvania kind of thing. Yeah, you can't go fight the final boss yet because you don't have the abilities to progress there. This would have been far more interesting if you could have gone to certain places or to a certain boss first, and then you could have had the freedom of choice of which skill tree do I want to pick up first. That would have been far more interesting, and it would have been a true open world allowing you to do that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, as the game is right now, it's a one and done. You play through, you complete as much as you want, and then you forget about the game. Sorry. It's not that good. There's some good stuff in there, but there's just not enough interesting things to do outside of the combat. There's nothing really to explore. Speaking of exploring, the visuals. The world's not that interesting either. It's the second biggest crime. The biggest being the performance, which we'll talk about later. The world is not pleasing to look at. It's boring. I feel like I'm going to national parks, which is great. I love national parks. I love mountains. I can do that here in America. I can get in my car. I can drive to a national park and enjoy it. I don't want that in a video game. When you transport me to a magical world and I have magical powers, I want to see magical stuff. I don't even think there's mountains in this. And it's a shame because there's really cool stuff in the game still. The Tantas have very interesting castles. The towns in front of them are kind of boring, but the castles are interesting. Sepal, kind of boring. But at the top, there's like a temple thing, and it's got cool architecture. The council people, they're in cool clothes. It's interesting looking. And then everybody else is stuck in like drab medieval stuff. The world is completely boring. I'm expecting like a weird sky, maybe weird mountain formations, and there's really none of that in the game. It's a flat, boring world. Let's talk about the enemies. 95% of the enemies are corrupted people and animals. 95% of the combat will be against zombies and wildlife. You're going to be beating up giant raccoons, bears, elk, crocodiles, or alligators. There was like Komodo dragon things, buzzards, vultures. That's it. This entire game, I have magic and I'm beating up wildlife. There's one dragon for sure. There's a couple of weird creatures in the dungeons, but they just look like mutant versions of regular animals. Where are my mythical creatures? Where's something interesting? Make something interesting. Make this a different world. I can go see all these creatures at the zoo and they won't try to kill me. Just because they're trying to kill me and they have crystals growing out of them doesn't make them interesting enough for me to care that I'm fighting wildlife. I'm just fighting the wildlife. It's not interesting. And maybe I could let that slide, except for one thing. Half of the time, it's a slideshow. The performance is terrible. The performance is terrible. I don't know what to say. I just built a gaming PC. It's an i7 on a 3070. It's a good PC. It was not cheap, like $3 to $4 grand, something like that. I spent it, I built myself. It runs great. It plays every game great. This game runs at a 44 frames. Solid, 44. I couldn't get it to 60. And then in the cutscenes, it drops. When you have lots of combat, it drops. How? Half the cutscenes appear to be out of focus. I don't understand how this game looks so bad and runs so bad. It's baffling that this game was allowed to release. The mocap that they used, motion capture for the faces, was amazing. Groundbreaking, amazing technology. They don't ever use it. 95% of the time, mocap is not being used. When it is being used, you notice it and you go, that looks good. That looks amazing. And then 95% of the cutscenes, it is not mocap. Why? Why was not the time taken to put mocap on every cutscene? There's no reason. There's no reason. And I can tell, I recognize a couple of the actors that have been in other games too. So they did like use actual faces. They just didn't motion capture every cutscene. And not just like the bad cutscenes, like important cutscenes, they don't use motion capture sometimes. It's baffling because it looks amazing when it's on screen. The game textures don't look that good, and I was very surprised. I was watching someone else review because I wanted to get a feel how people were feeling about it. This was made on the same engine as Final Fantasy 15. Final Fantasy 15 looks amazing. Final Fantasy 15 is one of the best looking games I've ever played. Not a great game, but it looks incredible. How? That came out in 2016. What happened? It's 8 years. You had 8 years to improve Square Enix, to make sure people have the tools to make a good looking game. 8 years later, and this comes out. This game should have came out before Final Fantasy 15. Why? Because then Final Fantasy 15 would have had more time for development and probably would have been a better game. Let's wrap this up. Forspoken could have been an amazing game. It truly could have. It needed another 6 months probably to at least fix the performance and to optimize the game. If that had happened, it would have gotten a better score for me. It probably been well received by the community as well. They didn't let that happen. They said, put it out the door now. They made a mistake, and they're going to pay for that mistake, unfortunately. This is the beginning and the end of Forspoken. We're never going to see it again. It's a dead game now. You chose that, Square Enix. I don't know why you chose that. I give this game 45 magic fonts out of 100 in its current state, and I do not recommend you buy this game until it is on sale. It's not worth $70. $70. I'm okay with the $70 price tag for the most part. I'm not going to get a huff about that, but this is definitely not worth it. Wait until it's on sale. This has been the Orthodox Oasis. My name is Jerome, or Hieronymus, and may the Lord bless you and keep you always. Until next time, goodbye.